Hello. Hey. Hi. It is I, Dr. Beep Boop, and I'm coming to you from Hyperactive Ghost Headquarters, which is it's Substack. It's Substack. For those of you who are unaware, Hyperactive Ghost is a Substack. It has text posts, video, photos and videos from the shows I go to, and some video stuff, and then this here podcast right here that is going to also still have more things because I can't stop adding things. But that is what Hyperactive Ghost is. I knew that it would be more than the way that I was seeing it. I wanted it to be more of a concept so that when I started to add things to it, it didn't seem like a weird idea, right? Like I didn't want to go brand so hard that I wasn't able to, I wasn't able to be flexible. So for those of you who are you've heard a few episodes now and you're like, okay, who is this person? I, Dr. B Boop, I'm a real doctor, just not a medical one. There's a long joke with, oh, not a real doctor, right? But, if you're on a plane and you have a heart attack, I can't save your life. But if you have a heartbreak, then I might be able to help you. I am a Swiss Army goth, which means that I will show up and I have like a bunch of different tools that I get. It's like, what do you need today? Oh, you need me to listen. Cool. Oh, you need me to plug in with an aux so that I could send you live. Okay, I could do that too. Right? Like that's just the kind of person that I am. So this episode is called Welcome to the Taxidermy of My Brain, but it is about the Royal and the Serpent show at Exit in October of 2023. Now, I came back around to this piece because it's really the first fully involved piece I put on the Substack. And I only did this, I wrote that piece like a couple of days after the show. Like, I'm pretty sure I started writing it the next day. But what I allowed myself to do in that post is to kind of romp around with like the ideas that I had because I didn't take myself very seriously in that one. I've always sort of oscillated between this idea of like seeming a little insecure, but then really underneath it all having this supreme creative confidence that means I will say and do things a lot of people would talk themselves out of before they do, like starting this whole venture of Hyperactive Ghost, right? Right. So here's the thing. The project for Hyperactive Ghost is depth, conceptualization. It is not intended to be a quick anything. But to that end, I'm going to try to get on track here with this one. So for those of you who are not familiar with Royal and the Serpent, the whole idea is that it is that she's discussing is the duality between us and our egos, right? So this conversation that we're having within ourselves and this constant negotiation is what Royal and the Serpent is sort of representing. So here's the thing. I show up, it's October 2023, and I show up at Exit In. So I'm standing there, and I had just looked, and I just realized that there were 3 openers. I feel like I might have seen that when I bought the ticket, but, that part is pretty shaky. But what I can say is this. When I realized that there were 3 shows, all 3 openers, all I thought was that I was just going to be there late. I didn't know about the sound ordinance until like the next day. Which, for those of you who aren't aware, Nashville has this sound ordinance that it's not like if you look it up, it's like, no, it's fine. There's wiggle room there. But this particular night there wasn't because right before 11 o'clock, everybody was like, done, GTFO. And I felt like I was scurrying off like a rat scurrying off a ship, right? Like, quick, get out. That's kind of what it felt like. So with Royal and the Serpent, this is a conversation between yourself and the ego. It's a negotiations, constant. It's something to be aware of. I think really what that says, though, is simply that she is aware of this conversation. She's aware that it's a dialogue and that really this night was what it looks like if you are winning. right? If it's you versus your own serpent, these are the things you do if you're winning against that serpent. And here's what I saw. Essentially, all three of her openers had nothing but warm things to say about her, and they all did so. And not in the kind of way where somebody's like, oh, of course I love the headliner because I'm supposed to be on this tour supporting, right? But more along the lines of having very personal things to say. One of those was and this is what I recall. I looked back over my piece, and so what I recall is that Jutes had said something like he'd either lost a set of shows or he had a tour that was impacted, and Royal snapped him up and added him. Yeah, but here's the thing. What I'm getting at is that the show had to end at 11 o'clock, right? Right? So who took the hit? Which set took the hit that night? It was Royal's. It was Royal's set that took the hit that we were sort of ostensibly all there to see. Her set took the hit. Now, it doesn't mean that she didn't play or that it wasn't a substantial set, but I could definitely see by the end of that night that it was Royal's set that took the time hit. Everybody, I don't know, this might have meant that everybody went a little harder for her during that time. Yeah, I mean, I think that has a lot to say. I think that right there alone, I could end this, hang up, and be like, oh, okay, well, that's an interesting tidbit to know about Royal and the Serpent. But I'm going to get into some other things that aren't just about Royal and the Serpent, right? So I used this piece at the time to like sort of do a romp around in my particular brand of very weird humor that not everyone gets, understandably. But I said a lot of things about what it's like being around musicians. That if you don't know that I was with a musician for 12 years and then I spent a great big, like over a decade among musicians, right? Then some of the things I say on this might seem out of pocket, but I think some of the things I say later in the piece might make better sense than it sounds. But anyway, let's get started. So I called this one the 3 first acts. The 3 first acts, right? So I said, yeah, I'm trying to communicate the feeling that while we might categorize them as openers because they aren't the headliner, it didn't feel that way to me. It felt like 4 shows, but I'm familiar with this kind of dynamic. So Baby Fisher opened up, right? So Baby Fisher's the first one who plays. And I actually have a video of him performing from that night on the piece. Let me see if I could like put my mic up there and you guys might be able to get some of the sound. Nope. Nope. Anyway, probably not. Okay. The thing that struck me, okay, from where I'm standing, I was still pretty close. I said he's 17 at the time. He was 17. And this blew my mind because of the talent. And I mean, I know many musicians start young, but let's remind ourselves about Exodus history, even if you don't buy any statements around it being exceptional. It felt very much like Will's Pub in Orlando. I liked his Catholic schoolboy outfit and bomb-ass makeup look too, but I'm always going to notice the makeup, FYI. But Dasha took the stage second. And from the moment she stepped out, I noticed the country star quality vibe she exudes, or did at the time. She's very pretty, very feminine, and she doesn't care about switching genres. I mean, this is something that I definitely looked up about her like that day or as I was writing this, and it was she does not really care about genre. And that night she had mentioned that she started off, I think she said she started off in pop, but moved over to country music. And it's not about the genre. She says it's just about whether or not it's a good song. And I liked that. I probably have her on one of these videos saying that. But yeah, I mean, yes, I love that. So take that, music nerds. Like, take that. My conversations around genre are very different, but I don't, it's one of the aspects of music that I don't play with as much as some people would probably like me to, but, Royal joined her on that stage for a Taylor Swift song, and it was so authentic. Like, they did not care if they lost their breath jumping and being excited because they were having a blast and the crowd was enjoying that vibe. I mention it because jerks will always see a video of live artists being human and complain they aren't doing vocal acrobatics like Christina Aguilera. That's in my generation where I was going to remember Christina Aguilera or you know, Mariah Carey. Right. Anyway, but it's live. It's live. But I can always tell when an artist is really loving the show they're at that night by the fact that they're just jumping up and down, and whether or not they can breathe in their heels, they don't care, right? But the same thing happened with Jutes. Going from Dasha's vibe to Jutes' vibe was blink-inducing because it was such a stark difference, but she joined him for a song too. And the way I described Jutes' song, Jutes' like music that night is sort of funny in retrospect, but here's the thing. I'm going to repeat it until I don't have to anymore, and that's this. I'm not trying to describe a song in a way that is going to like nail it for everyone. I understand that that's not a real thing. I'm not trying to sound like a professor of rock, right? Like, I'm not trying to do that. So sometimes I will just do unconventional descriptions of the music, but the way I thought of it that night was his music is some kind of soup of that rap punk style by artists like Beastie Boys and Rage Against the Machine. But there were also some Blink 182 type moments of cleaner studio sound, right? So that's the way that I was thinking of his music that night. Has it changed? Yeah. Mm-hmm. In fact, I've seen him play on some larger stages, and he's a different act when he's up there, right? This night, though, he was a musician who was grateful that his friend had given him a spot to play. And that's all. That's really what they all felt that night, or at least that's what I felt watching them all play and interact, right? Pick your drop from the floor. I said what I said. A peak of one sound does not negate the others. Okay, I said what I said. Just because I said there's a Blink 182 moments of cleaner sound does not mean that it has to be a reflection of anything other than just, hey, right? Like, this is what I heard. I don't think it negates anything else, right? I just don't. Plus, at the time I was 48, I'm 50 now. I'm not a trained musician, and I was writing for like 5 people. Even now, I'm not writing for that many people, but I mean, I was getting weird enough with it to jettison any attitude about what's in my brain when I hear things, right? So on the Substack, this is so funny. I'm looking at an image I put up, and it is of P.T. Barnum's Fiji mermaid. You're like, what? Like, where'd you come with that? Here's the thing. Like, I've always I've known that P.T. Barnum is Phineas Taylor Barnum, right? That's what his name was. I am, for those of you, who don't know, I don't know who does, but I'm an early Americanist, or at least that's one of my areas of focus. And so I did a bunch of work around this particular phase of American life. And whenever I feel this sense of like somebody has taken a bunch of things from other genres and then start putting together these things that don't really exist. That's the Fiji mermaid, and that's, for those of you who aren't, familiar, you can go to the Substack. But what he essentially did was take two different creatures and sew them together to create this idea of a mermaid. And that was the kind of thing that P.T. Barnum did. I mean, this guy was the grift. It was just always the grift, but, a century, like ages and ages later, we can find it funny to some degree. But like, that's kind of what like echoes in my mind when I start trying to put something together from other parts, right? Like, if you have me sitting there and I'm like, okay, so right now I'm hearing Beastie Boys. Okay. Rage Against the Machine. Now Blink 182, right? If you don't like Blink 182, but you like the other two, you might be like, what are you doing, Doc? That is so wrong. And I'm like, no, you're the one adding value. I'm not. I'm just saying that's what I heard. And I don't think there's like a wrong thing with that, right? But that's just sort of what I start to think about is the Fiji mermaid. Okay. But when for Royal's set, the PS, like there are some videos here. I would absolutely like play them if I felt like it was acceptable to do, or if I got a message from the artist that were like, do that again, or write a piece on me now. If you are one of these musicians, like if you are either Baby Fisher, Dasha, Jutes, or even Royal, and you want me to do this again, or you want me to do something else and expand and use the footage, let me know. But I just don't want to get sued. So for Royal and the Serpent set, there was about a minute or so of institution-inspired voiceovers, right? Like that's something that I can definitely recognize in the show. So it maybe shouldn't have been surprised by the long white smock dress that she came out in. But P.S., another reason this is valid is because I did mention that I was in a residential facility where they were looking at my health. I mean, it's not this easily drawn, institutional feelings, but like for me, it's been a year. Only a year at that point. I was like, well, this is what we're doing tonight. Because, yeah, I felt like, wow, is this what I'm doing? Am I in the theater of my own brain at this point? But I was also struck by a particular fluidity of movement she opened with, though she transitioned to more punk moves like later. But I kept trying to figure out who her moves reminded me of in that intro. And I realized that it was, I think it's pronounced Ashish Vyas. That is a gentleman from Thievery Corporation. And there is a very specific way that he moves around the stage. And that is what I was sort of envisioning when I was watching her in the that opening sequence of her show that night. That is what I was thinking of. So, yeah. And the way I put it was, you ever seen that guy with his bass just moving all over the floor like he's sliding? And that's it. Like he's moving around like he's sliding. Like, where is the little spinny floor thing? Google that. I'm not doing it for you. Yeah. Funny. Anyway. So I get it, another weird comparison, but I'm talking about the way she moved around the stage in the opening number because it was different from the way that she moved a little bit later. But I imagine any artist would think that's a badass comparison because it is. It was also interesting to think that while hearing more of a punk sound, that's sort of the comparison there. Like I was pulling from shows I've seen of Thievery Corporation and comparing that to the way that she moved. And I don't care about the weirdness. Maybe discuss it. That's really the way I think. But Royal is a really great performer and she's not averse to busting her ass up there. Man, she did. She was busting her ass. In addition to the institutional voiceovers, we got a collective 30 minutes of the pogo alone. A few different styles of vocals, fake blood. We got fake blood, yes. And that's what I'm trying to say, right? Is that at the end of the night, the amount of entertainment that they gave us, 4 acts. One of them, at least one of them, aside from Royal Jutes, seeing him like on much bigger stages since then, It just, to me, I'm like, dang, that was a lot, fake blood. And I got a picture. It's on the Substack. There's an image of Royal in a white smock, and there's fake blood on what she has on, right? But to say it was worth the ticket price is obvious by now, and I hate to say it, but maybe charge more in the future, boo. We essentially got 4 shows for like $35. I say that as nothing more than an enthusiast with a musty little corner of metaphorical bookstore needle nosing everything, while I also reckon with the inflations of my true feelings around the need to keep art accessible. Right. I think we all know where we need to trim the fat socioeconomically, and it ain't music. And it's funny, it's because where was I? I'm saying this in 2023, but let's do it again. We don't need to trim the fat from the arts. In fact, there are other things we could trim the fat from. Instead, and I think a lot of us have said this, instead of having, AI write for me, how about find a way for it to do the dishes, right? We want to do the art. We don't want to fucking do the dishes. But somehow AI is getting to do the art while we still have to do the dishes. I'm just saying. If we have to trim the fat, don't take it from music. But that said, you gotta eat. Y'all gotta eat. And this is the thing that I wish that I had a better answer for in this moment. And that is that musicians have to eat. And like the fact, like when I say that, it's people often forget this fact that because people who entertain them, who are giving them art, it's difficult for them to see them as human because they've relegated them to a position where the thing that they're doing is just fun for them, right? So like if you're looking at somebody like me and you're like, oh, she just loves going to all of those shows. You think it's not work though? Like you don't think that it's labor. And that's a, And the reason I'm even having this discussion right now is that I was like, listen, if you've got 4 shows, which is, let me do this, 4 sets in one night, that was like $10 a set, less than. And I'm just saying, maybe charge a little more. Y'all got to eat. I would have been like, here, have another $10 if I'd known how to, right? So I'm just saying. It ain't a movie you can just play over and over again. A show, a live music performance is just a one-time use in the most decadent way possible. You're not recording something you can just play over and over again. That's the difference too between a studio make of anything and a live thing of anything, right? So yeah. So about Royal and the Serpent's serpent. I've been around musicians my entire life. I have no memories of a time without that factor in my life. And this is true. I mentioned my previous life of 12 years, but just go all the way back in the entirety of my life. And you have me standing, quite joking, like it's on my socials, a lot of jokes about me as a kid, as a singer, right? And my father who played guitar, right? It's been a factor in my whole life. But I mention all of this because the kindness and warmth and love expressed by the first 3 acts that night was authentic. I believe she is a supportive and empathetic person, which brings me to the whole conversation around her serpent, which is her ego. And that is, for those playing at home, Royal Serpent says, it's me and my ego. But I would like it noted that I was writing about the lack of ego when I went to look up where the name originated. Seriously. So what I'm getting at here is that I stopped to go look up the bit about her ego mid-writing this. And, when I came back to think of it, it's really so authentic. If you think about it, I didn't know. I had to go back and revise like the top of my paper, right, of this thing that I wrote, and I had to think about it. I was so involved in writing about how giving and warm and kind and that this woman, appeared to be, that I didn't even, it wasn't until midway through the piece that I realized, oh, oh, the ego is the serpent. I just think that says a lot, right? And the fact that that was something that took place says a lot. Is there, so is there like a reverse Dunning-Kruger, like, but for arrogance, wherein the people who chastise themselves for having egos are the very people who care enough to struggle with it at all, right? Caring enough to struggle with it, I think says a lot right there. So in my experience in the arts, mine being specifically in music and literature, I think that a lot of people forget this about me, that my world of art is like poets and, yeah. My art is not as present in my world with musicians because they typically aren't as deep into poetry in the written word. That's just my experience. But there is a shared power in the necessity to harm and heal. That's in the art. But ego is one thing that fucks it up every time. Ego will always fuck up your art. You won't listen to anyone. Your vocal acrobatics are hogging the stage. Your 140-line poem in iambic pentameter when you're 21 years old and using the voice of some guy trying to push a woman to give in. That's sorry. That's an actual poem. But anyway, so we're moving on. But the moniker tells us she's not mincing words about the temptation to put yourself over your art. We aren't talking about confidence. And I know that this isn't a clean Freud reference, but putting the benefits of the art above the art just sucks. I think she knows that. If she's continually battling that, well, she's human. But here's the thing about ego at shows. Musicians aren't the only people at a show with a giant ego. So are the fans. I know some fans out there who have their own ego around the perceived proximity to power that is being close to the artist, but it's a whole other thing when you're on the stage. I know there is ego everywhere and people have their attractions, but I've never been in a grocery store with an engineering friend and like had to say, oh, hey, engineering friend, I think that woman just dropped her panties. We all love a great geek and we all have our own stuff, but come on, music and poetry are bed buddies who get you bed buddies because music and poets and writers, we're all here collaborating in some space in between our little worlds of art, right? Maybe you have us write your lyrics, but together, we get you bed buddies. I'm just saying. Decades of my life managing the energy of mediocre poets, convinced poetry is how they'll secure pussy. Just the worst ever. But when they're great artists and great people, you open your wallet because your wallet is a vote in this world. Your wallet is a vote. Every time you open your wallet, it is a vote. So what I have to say is maybe just don't fuck them. Musicians are not receptacles for your otherwise imprisoned desire. Leave them alone, right? Like if you have no intentions on treating musicians as though they are people, right? And allowing them to have certain struggles. And if what you're doing, I've seen this before, and this probably gonna hurt a little bit. I've seen some moments after a show where a bunch of fans come up to a musician and they all, everybody loves to have a photo with their favorite musician. You take a photo and you say hello and you're like, I get to remember later that I met this musician and that I did this thing, right? But some people, I've watched some people forget that the musician is a human. Now the musician is kind of this piece of meat and they're posing around the piece of meat and that's what it feels like, right? And I understand that famous musicians know that it's sort of part of the gig, but it still sucks to watch. Yeah. And here's the thing. Me grabbing the megaphone, even closer, even louder. Fans can be every bit as terrible as we portray musicians to be as they persistently ignore no and jockey for the cool proximity. Mm. Mm. But I say that as a college, as a former college lecturer, professor person whose profession has its own category on the Quinn app. Do you know who does not have their own category on the Quinn app? Musicians. Thank you. Thank you. I win. I feel like I just won something I'm not going to use, or at least that's what I said at the time. Like, yay, I have my own. Look at all this power I have that I'm not going to use. I'm not supposed to use it. I'm just saying. I see you holding your panties behind your back and averting your eyes, dirty Diana, and I hear you with the guitar over there telling me to pipe down. You say that until the unwanted attention shit happens, and then you get to listen to them talk about you like you aren't sitting right there, and you wonder if they're interested in you as a person. And one day it hits you that it feels terrible. Before you have to deal with it, you think, they can use me however, oh yes, until you feel like shit and wreck relationships. Oh, yawn. Come back, let me finish. In all seriousness, giving up your time on stage to support your very talented friends is a really selfless thing to do, and it's beautiful. As I said, Nashville's 11 p.m. sound ordinance that I do understand is like not hard and fast, in terms of it, but just so she had to her shorten her performance to do that. That is a characteristic of a musician's musician, and I know some deeply beautiful souls who are the best of that world. By the time Royal and the Serpent took the stage, folks were very just like rawr and very young. I was the oldest person in the room. I am the oldest person in a lot of rooms at shows, but Chris Rock warned us about this, but I didn't listen because I was a girl's eye roll. And that's, he said, Chris Rock, if the joke that I'm remembering, and this is the one where he was like, you have to make a choice between, a relationship or new pussy. I loved the show. I loved that joke. I loved the show. But I loved that show despite the way I skulked about and stuck out like a sore thumb in my goth Barbie outfit. Also, the bartender there made me a spontaneous cocktail mix I had 2 of, and it was so good I'd share the mix, but just go there and ask her for the Pickers pineapple thingy she made, the weird redhead. Probably not. She might not even work there anymore. This was like ages ago, right? But I did, I went up to the bar, and I think something, and this is just a moment of reflection on the way I think some people up there see me. And that is that if I walk into your venue and I step over, I'm likely like in my full authentic energy, in this phase of my life. I don't pretend. If I did, I would probably, more people would like me. But I went up to the bartender that night and I was like, oh, hello, like, what are these things? Because I think something I didn't take into consideration is that, like, the way you order a drink was even like different up there, right? Like, you don't use the same words, right? Up there, like, if I said, I'll have a rum and Coke, they'd have been like, is Pepsi okay? Oh, yeah, which was like, down here, you'd be like, no, it's not. We're south of Atlanta, but you understand what I'm getting at. So that night, like, she was messing on a drink. I was like, I like these things. And she was mixing it up, but she seemed to love that moment. Like, I imagine they do this for a lot of people, but it was interesting because I was like, I don't know what I would like. She was like, here, let me make something for you. But let me know if you'd like audio of me reading or just adding value to these with the accompanied shit. Yeah, that's what I ended that post with. But so here's the thing, and here's where I'm going to wrap up. This was supposed to have like video and audio, but I want to have this. It's more important to me right now that this shows up tomorrow in the way that I want it to show up tomorrow, because this is all launching at 5 a.m. on at 5 a.m. Yes. Less than 7 hours from now. And so what will go out would be a new sort of organization of the same post. Like I had to go in, delete things and whatnot. But what I want to say is this. I am now setting out on yet another leg of my life. Some things have changed that needed to change, that I just was like, you know what? Nope. You sign up for one particular kind of life and you think, yeah, this sounds good. And then you're like, you know what? Nope. But yeah, so I don't know what's going to happen in 2026. I don't know what this year is going to be like for me, but I will say one thing, and that's this. It's the bridge. 2026 is a bridge to me. I just have to stay on the bridge and just keep going between destinations. I don't know where I'm going to land, but I'm going to talk about music for at least a year, just nonstop. If it catches on, awesome. If it doesn't, in a year, I will have a bunch of things to put in a portfolio, or who knows. What I can say is this, like I definitely, if I can manage it, I hope to hit the road a little bit more in 2026 in order to like get to places to write about them, to do pieces I would love to show up to shows and go live on the Substack by using a proper aux, right? And in order to have the sound I would love to do that. I think that musicians deserve to have people like me around who are sort of someplace between like fans and then, sort of random people from like the industry, right? But to do so with a level of respect and kindness and recognition for the choices they make. Yeah. That's the kind of person I hope to be in 2026. But anywho, by all means, go to the Substack and make comments there, or, make them on YouTube, which, okay, so I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the episode, but if I did not, I will be creating playlists of songs that are performed by artists in the pieces in the podcast episodes, right? Mostly I will be including songs I talk about, right? For example, for this one, I would bring up Overwhelmed, but I didn't really specifically talk about any of her songs because what I saw that night that was more striking to me was this conversation. But check your streaming service to see if there's a hyperactive ghost post playlist. Anywho, thank you for hanging out with me. Bye. Dr. Beep Boop out.